That
They weren't
area is,
legally.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
That's why there's a fee.
And on behalf of the Village of Cary and the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, I'd like to hereby call this meeting to order on this Thursday, August the 24th at 7:30 p.m. At this time, I'd like to ask our Director of Community Development, Mr. Simmons, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Jasper? Here. Commissioner Kretschmer?
Here.
Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Here.
Commissioner Graziano?
Present.
Commissioner Pippin?
Here.
Commissioner Williams?
Here.
Chairman Corey.
Here. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everyone. So before I begin, I really just want to take a brief moment and publicly say thank you to Mr. Graziano for stepping in while I was away.
Wait a minute, can I record this?
It's recorded.
It's being recorded. We got it on camera.
And I want all of you to know that I was actually at Pepperdine University at the Grazia Dio School of Business for their commencement address. And so I thought that was kind of apropos that you were filling in for me, Jim, so thank you very much.
More than happy, sir.
Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, we have one case before us tonight, and I know some of you may not be familiar with the proceedings, so let me just step you through the way the process will work. At the beginning, what we'll do is we'll call the case, and then we're going to ask our Director of Community Development, Mr. Simmons, he'll give us an overview of the case. And then amongst us as ZPA members, we may have some questions for Mr. Simmons. Upon conclusion, we'll turn it over to yourself, to Mr. Weinsma, whoever's going to present on your behalf. And upon conclusion of that presentation, again, the ZPA members may have some questions for yourselves. Once we conclude that portion, we open up to the public. So all of you assembled here are welcome to speak. You may have noticed the sign-in sheet at the back of the room. We kindly ask that you sign it. And if you do choose to speak, we also ask that you state your name and address for the record. It is being recorded. It's on YouTube. So when you go home, you can watch this proceeding. It may not be on tonight, but it'll be on later in the week. Once we close the public portion of the meeting, we take it back amongst ourselves. We may review some of the comments that have been received. We subsequently will take a vote. That vote is delivered back to our elected officials, and they become the final arbiter of tonight's discussion. So it's a very straightforward proposition. We have counsel here with us tonight, Ms. Tappendorf, and so Julie, good to see you again, and thank you for joining. She helps us keep us on the legal proceedings. And gentlemen, I did ask counsel, just so you're aware, about the actual motion tonight. And sometimes you probably have seen from past pattern and practice, we sometimes break the motion up into more than one piece. According to counsel, I think we're going to call this motion as one.
Okay.
Unless I get some flailing pushback from anyone here, but I think that's the way we may proceed.
Why are you looking at me?
Just double checking, Mr. Graziano. So with that, before I begin, let me just ask the ZPA members if you have any questions before we begin, or counsel? No? All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Simmons for case number ZPA 07003. This is going to be for Ryan Building Group, Inc., and it's for conditional use for planned and development, unit development, preliminary plat approval, and final plat approval. And the location is south half of West Lake subdivision, located northeast of the intersection of Route 14 and Three Oaks. And over to you, Mr. Simmons.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As stated, the request this evening is speaking towards the proposed re-subdivision of the southern half of the West Lake subdivision. The petitioner is seeking various approvals this evening related to the proposed development of that site, including conditional use for the planned unit development, and then both preliminary and final plat approval related to various phases of that proposed development. Just a brief history for both members of the audience and also the ZPA Commission here. The project, Westlake Subdivision, originally was approved and received zoning approval and annexation back in 2003. It was originally approved for a 227 townhome development. It included some retail along Three Oaks Road, which includes the existing Westlake Shopping Center, and also the AutoZone property and vacant lot located to the west of that retail space. As part of the improvements that were performed It included various bike paths or walking paths throughout the site, a park and detention basin that would serve the neighborhood as fully designed. Currently, due to obviously the recession, the housing market in the area, the development of the property is stalled, where to date 67 of the original 227 units, or just under 30%, have been constructed on site. The last townhouse that has been constructed in the development was most recently completed in 2010. So it's been over 7 years since any activity has taken place on the property of new construction. As you can see by the aerial, the roadways have been constructed throughout the entire subdivision. Sidewalks were installed in locations where townhomes were put in or developed in the site, but the bike path system was developed throughout the entire development. As approved, there are 118 units that are planned south of Wellington Lane, and then another 42 units that are planned north of Wellington Lane. The petitioner's proposal this evening is seeking to get development approvals for the southern half of the development, where those 118 units were previously approved. As mentioned, the petitioner is the Ryan Building Group. They're the contract purchaser of the southern half of the subdivision. Their proposal this evening is to convert or seek approval for the development of the southern half of the subdivision. Instead of the originally approved townhomes, they're seeking to construct single-family detached housing as part of the PUD. The petitioner has done other developments within the village of Cary. Most recently, they completed several lots within the Enclave subdivision, which is in the Fox Trails neighborhood. So they do have some development history locally that have worked with the village in the past. The north half of the subdivision, the areas that are north of Wellington Lane, are not part of the petition or a review this evening. Based off the requests before us this evening, the townhome plan, which was originally approved for the north half of the site, would remain intact. William Ryan Homes is not purchasing those portions of the property. So the current owner of those development pads would be able to sell those for potential townhome construction in the future as well. It would not have to go through a zoning process if they generally conform to the plans that were originally approved. The concept or proposal we're reviewing this evening was preliminarily reviewed by the village board back in September of last year. The petitioner's done quite a bit of work, due diligence to get to this point. From that time period, working through legal matters and property ownership and the documents you see in your petition this evening, and they're now going forward through the zoning process for their development approvals. Brief overview of the project. As proposed, it will be a 59-lot subdivision. The lot sizes, the minimum lot size as proposed would be just under 7,600 square feet. With the average lot size being a little over 9,600 square feet. The developer is proposing a minimum lot width in their PUD of a 55-foot requirement, but the actual minimum that's being provided in the plan is a 57-foot wide lot. The density as proposed for the single-family plan would be about 3.8 units per acre, which is less than what the R2 zoning district requires, is less than the maximum that the R2 district allows of 4 units per acre, but would be relatively half of what was originally approved for townhomes in the area of just about 7.7 units in this portion of the development. As the chairman mentioned, this evening we'll run a relative fashion from this slide. Rather than myself going through the entire zoning process, I will open up to the petitioner at this point to kind of provide an overview of their requests. After their presentation, I would like to come back, and if there are items that are not touched in their presentation, I'll give additional information as far as how the zoning applies to the property and comprehensive plan and zoning standards, and then also staff's recommendation. So if there's no questions for me at this point, I'd be happy to turn it over to the petitioner to provide more information on their proposal.
Gentlemen, any questions for Mr. Simmons?
You know what the median lot size is?
The median lot size? I didn't calculate. I don't know if you have the information on the median size. I don't know the median sizes.
Anything else, gentlemen?
Is that currently a PUD or is it just zoned R3?
The project received conditional use approval for a multifamily development, so it did not receive PUD approval. This would be focusing in with the existing underlying zoning of R3, establishing a PUD for the area that's outlined in red on this slide, and then would allow for this development to move forward.
Anyone else, gentlemen? Okay, so I think what we're going to do now is we're going to turn it over to Ryan Building Group and Mr. Weinsma. I'm not sure if it's yourself or your colleague. And, okay. And if we could just begin, kind sir, with your name.
My name is Mark Eiden, E-I-D-E-N. I'm the attorney on the project. My office is at 1000 North Rand Road, Suite 120, Wakanda, Illinois.
Thank you very much.
I can figure this out. I am going to walk through some of the, what's involved in converting this thing from a condominium, or not a condominium, a townhome, to single-family residences. And the reason I'm doing that is to show you how all of this works. When this came into my office, it was, well, this is pretty easy. We just change it from a townhome development to single-family residential. It's all residential, so that should be, I hate to use the word, but a no-brainer. The issue here is that the owner that you've probably heard several times, it's REO Funding Solutions for LLC, I guess. They own the townhome pads. Now, if you look at the farthest illustration to the left, it says REO. They own the pads. Well, that isn't all the land that we need. If you look at the middle illustration, you'll see what surrounds all of those pads are common areas. Those are owned separately by the association for the entire Westlake project. So when you look at what it is that Ryan is actually acquiring, on the right, you'll see all the darkened area except for a lightened area along where the, what is it, Westlake Drive enters the subdivision. The model townhome building was constructed quite a while ago, and that will remain in the association. To accomplish this conversion, I want to note that the entire Westlake townhome area is governed by a single declaration, which itself is not suitable for single-family home development. What we have decided to do, since this is a phased project, we have a phase 1 and a phase 2, and if you're not familiar with where that demarcation line is, I'll show you in a minute. But because it's a phased project, we need to figure out a way to keep the neighborhood entirely integrated, depending on what we do. If we do just phase 1, that has consequences. If we do phase 1 and phase 2, that has consequences. And we've gone to great lengths to be sure that however we do this, there's still a lot of continuity in the project that remains. Now, the current intent, obviously, is to go all the way through phase 2, but you know, we've had some recent history in the U.S. that keeps everybody a little on their guard. What we have to do is we first have to eliminate the townhome declaration from the Ryan lots. We do that once for phase 1, once for phase 2. We then have to be sure that the townhome declaration covers only the remaining townhome land. And so what we've done is create two amendments to the declaration that have been pre-approved by the title company and the sellers and others, and hopefully you. The idea being that we would record with the plat of subdivision and our deed to Phase 1 this amendment to the Westlake Property Owners Association declaration to remove Phase 1 from its coverage and to lessen the area by taking out Phase 1 that remains covered by the townhome declaration. We then impose our own declaration that's suitable for single-family homes, and we pick up the obligations for maintaining, well, keeping and maintaining the bike paths, and we also have entered into or have an agreement that is agreed to but not signed. We have to wait until we actually go through the motions on this, but it is a cost-sharing agreement because when the subdivision was designed, the detention area up in the northwest open area you see there was designed for all of the property. But if you note, our property, Phase 1 and Phase 2, does not have any room for detention. It's all up in that other lot, and that other lot will remain in the townhome association. So we have a structure set up where we calculated impervious surfaces and things of that nature, and we are going to then contribute our percentage share to the annual cost of maintaining the stormwater detention facilities. It turns out that that split is 52-48, ours being 52%. The cost isn't large, but we want to make sure that everything is seamless, and we've considered all the various options. So on the first phase, we record the First Amendment to the declaration, revoking it as to Phase 1, and reducing the land area that it covers for townhomes. If we proceed with Phase 2, which is clearly our intent, we would then record a second townhome amendment, association declaration amendment, that would do the same thing for Phase 2. These documents would be signed at the time of going with Phase 1, so we don't have to go back and redo all of this. What we're trying to do is accomplish everything on the front end and make the sequence of events automatic so that everybody knows what's going on the front end and everything is fixed on the front end. So you don't really have to come back and visit this at another point, except for the fact that we have to come in with the final plat for Phase 2 if we go ahead with that. Now, this is just an illustration of everything I talked about. The area that's blank to the left is Phase 1. When we take Phase 1 out, when it's conveyed to us, and then we remove it from the townhome declaration and impose our own, what remains in the Westlake townhome development is the area that you see darkened on the left. If we only proceed with Phase 1, you can see how the neighborhoods and land uses are nicely separated. And so you wouldn't lose any continuity in the townhome development, and you just have a single-family development in between the townhome development and the uses along Route 14. If we go further with Phase 2, you'll see the whole southern area, other than the model, is a white space. And at that point, the declaration would have been removed and replaced again by our declaration. And then what would remain in the townhome association would be that area to the north. So this is all pretty self-executing, and it keeps the neighborhoods integrated and compatible. Can't read my fine print. I think Brian already went through a number of items on here, so I will skip down to about the middle of the page. It's a little bit of history. I think you already know this, but this is an infill parcel. By infill, I mean it's basically developed all the way around it, except for the townhome development. The townhome development stalled for reasons that we all know. Currently, there's not a lot of appetite to develop the remaining townhomes, although there may be once we get started. We think a single-family land use has merit, it is marketable, and that in this market and this town should do well. So when we do that, we think that activity begets activity, and hopefully that will have an influence on the remaining townhome development. As I stated, it's infill. Everything around it's been completed, and we have a partially completed subdivision here with public improvements, as Brian just said. And I really want now to point out a provision in your comprehensive plan, which is also in Brian's memo. It says that one of the goals of the plan is to focus on infill, unfinished subdivisions, which this is, and vacant properties, which this is, in existing neighborhoods, which this is, provide an opportunity for infill development that should be encouraged prior to growth area development. So in your comprehensive plan, this is kind of a priority. It meets all the criteria, and for an unsuitable development, obviously, that wouldn't be supported. But this one fits seamlessly into what's already out there and your land uses and the goals of the plan, so we think it's a good fit. We have a large variety of architectural styles. They're in my materials. I assume you probably have those in electronic format at this point. We have some of that here if you'd like to see it. You probably can see it better on your computers. But this is all recently updated architecture. Ryan has its own marketing department, and they have architects that constantly follow the market and update the floor plans to follow the preferences of the public. And those actually continue to evolve quite a bit. And so in this instance, staff had asked us if we could have, a ranch model with some elevations and a master down to accommodate existing residents that may not want the typical two-story dwelling, and we have included that. If you would like any presentation on the architecture, Nate Wines was here, and he can go through that, but we can wait till I'm done with my discourse. As Brian said, we're using existing infrastructure. It's there. It's ready. There won't be a lot of delay in bringing this project forward. There's not going to be mass grading and underground work and all of that typically takes 4 or 5 months. So we got a leg up there. We're going to modify a little bit of the infrastructure because the curb cuts aren't right. They were for townhomes. Ours are going to be for single family. But those are minor matters, and some utilities are being rerouted. But those, they're just whatever's appropriate to the utility companies to provide service. Now, I've included in my materials the standards that need to be addressed for a conditional use and a plan development. The plan development is a conditional use, but the plan development itself has its own set of standards to guide this concept that's not just strict zoning. It's how do we lay this out to make a unique subdivision that accommodates the needs of the village and the area. I have gone through each one of those standards in writing in your books. If you want me to go through those and recite them to you, that's more of a threat than I will be happy to do that. If not, I would like to just incorporate them in the record as having been submitted in writing. If there's anyone, when the audience steps up, would like to hear that recited, I, of course, can do that at a later point. What you're being asked to approve is a preliminary plan for the entire development and a concept or a master plan, PUD plan, for the entire development. And basically those plans are identical other than the labels. And there's good reason for that, because the preliminary plan is a very accurate depiction of the master plan. The rest of the PUD is drawings and standards and engineering and landscape architecture and things of that nature. So we're asking for approval of this plan. We've given it to you as two separate plans. I just was going to show it to you with just once because I don't need to click to the next page and show you the same thing. But if you look, there's a division line, a dashed line, that separates phases 1 and 2. Now, once again, we're trying to make this a very standalone, or make the phases standalone. So we drew the lines along what was conveniently a north-south right-of-way. I think it's Augusta Lane. And then the northerly extension divides that lot from the park area. And the southerly extension runs along the boundaries of 2 original outlots. So it's really a well-placed division line. If phase 2 were not to proceed, there are no lines that go through lots or around lots or anything of that nature. We're also asking for final plat for phase 1. This is a copy of a portion of the final plat, but it indicates what it is that we're looking, what we're looking for final approval on. Obviously, to the right is phase 2. So what will happen if we're successful is that we will have a plan development, master plan, a preliminary plat approved for the entire project, a final plat for phase 1, and then when we get in, we start putting up models and we see how sales go. That would dictate the timing of phase 2, but as I talked with Julie this morning, not beyond 2 years. If we haven't applied for final plat in 2 years, we either come back and ask you for it, or it'll just go away. And what'll happen then is phase 2 will remain townhomes. And as I illustrated earlier, it's a nice long cohesive townhome development, which runs the full distance north to south with just the single family homes poking out to the east a bit. So we're looking for that final plat. On that, we would come back within 2 years to apply for the final plat for phase 2, which the timing for which would be dictated by market conditions. We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think those market conditions were good. So, and actually I just walked through what it is we're looking for. The conditional use PUD, the preliminary and final plan development, master plan, and the preliminary plat of subdivision for both phases, and the final plat of subdivision for phase 1. And we're not looking to change any zoning. So it's really pretty straightforward. Conditional development for plan, conditional use for plan development. That's basically what it is. So with that, if you'd like to see some architecture, we can show you that, or if you'd like to rely on what you have there, or if any of you would like to see that.
Well, why don't we do it? First of all, thank you for your presentation. And before we switch places here, let me just ask the committee members if they have any questions for yourself at this time. No questions at this time?
My normal question would be, had the fire department looking this over, or 2 questions. But my assumption is, since we're going from multifamily to single family, the fire department is probably pretty okay with this.
Yeah, and the roads and the emergency accesses have already been determined. You come in from the west and from the south. So if one of the roads is blocked, the emergency services can still get in, which is pretty typical planning. We can't change the layout that was previously approved, and I'm sure the emergency services and fire department were reviewing it at that time.
My secondary question then is, obviously you've notified several of the neighbors. Any negative comments or positive comments?
We invited the neighbors to a informal meeting at the Algonquin Township Center. It was in February. We laid out, for those who attended, and the turnout was fairly good, what our plan was, what we intended to build, what our product type was, which is obviously single family, that we intended to take all of their considerations and review them to be sure that we integrated properly. I think the discussion that really was most paramount was, what do we do about detention? We're not paying for it. And we said, yes, we, of course, will undertake what our fair share is. And then I went to the engineers, they calculated impervious surfaces, and we proposed that to the association. They felt that that was a fair division, and there is an agreement that has already been prepared, and it is in the contract with the association. So everything in that regard is laid out. Everything's on paper. It's just not been executed, including the amendments to the declarations.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, that was actually going to be a question. I'm going to direct my question to council. I just want to make sure that we're buttoned up from a legal perspective, that the amendments that you're talking about, as far as council is concerned, all meet a legal standard.
Yeah, and the village doesn't have to, we're not a party to the declarations and the homeowner association documents, but as part of the approval, when the board gets it, we will be reviewing those.
Thank you very much. So any other questions? So thank you again. I'm sorry, Pat?
Going forward from here, what are we doing? We kind of changed the dance steps here a little bit.
Okay, so I think what we're going to try and do, with everyone's agreement, is that I think we may be turning it over to Mr. Weinsma to give us some another overview of this, and then we're going to ask the public for their comments, as we traditionally do.
Okay, we're going back to Brian at
Yeah,
all?
Yeah, he'll reframe it.
He said he was
whatever
going
they,
to wrap up at the
Yeah.
end.
At the end?
correct,
Before we vote.
Before we go.
All right.
before public comments are.
Okay. So we have one more presentation then? before
Yes.
we- Okay.
At least.
I do have one question on the architecture. The materials and the colors, do you have standard for that one that would kind of blend in with the townhomes?
Larger format examples for you.
Because ours were kind of black and white, really.
Yeah, yeah.
And give us a color.
Want to blend in with the townhomes.
Oh, yeah.
At least.
Yeah, I'll get into that a little bit more. Good evening, my name is Nate Weinsma. I'm a Vice President of William Ryan Homes, Ryan Building Group. I feel like this is awful loud. First of all, I can't remember whose question it was, but the median size, I don't have, it was Mr. Jasper. I don't have a median size, but the average size is on your plat. It's just shy of 9,600 feet.
Right.
I
You know the
don't,
difference between?
yeah, I don't know if it's that far different on the median, but we can run that calculation and get it back to Brian. You know, sitting here tonight, I realized that this is the first time this plan commission's seen this, and I kind of lose sight of the fact that we've been at this for 2 years. So for us, this is all very much old hat, and we've been through so much of it for so long that just to give you and anyone else here in the public a little history is, you know, we took a very pointed and intentional approach to the south portion of this property because for a couple different reasons, but primarily it didn't seem appropriate that given the way this community's been built out so far, the remaining pads for townhomes all lie between existing buildings once you get north of Wellington. So to attempt to plan any other product in between attached housing just seemed like it wasn't really appropriate, didn't really fit. So that was intentional. Our history here started back a couple of years ago and with the Plody Group. And the primary reason for that was we, a couple of years ago, came to an agreement with Plody on another community of theirs in Algonquin called the Coves. That was very similar to Westlake in that it was planned and developed and built, partially built as a townhome community that we felt, and Plody agreed, would be more appropriate in this market as a single-family development, and entered into a process with them and the Village of Algonquin to replat and redevelop that community to a single-family community. And in that case, it was very similar to this in that there were still some vacant townhome pads adjoining the existing townhomes and in between existing townhomes that still remain townhome pads today. But we built 65 single-family homes there on what were previously developed as townhome lots. So that started our process with Plody, where Plody then kind of entered into preliminary negotiations with us saying we'd like to do the same thing in Cary. And we were building in the enclaves of Fox Trail, felt that Cary was a good market and demographic for us for single family as well. Started down that path, and kind of unbeknownst to us, they were already also in discussions with REO, which is a entity of Turnstone, which is a fund out of Atlanta, to buy Westlake and the remaining townhomes in the Coves in Algonquin and a couple of other properties from Plody. And so that was a bigger picture deal for them to liquidate some of their standing inventory. So when we came and approached REO, initially REO said, you know, we're a $5 billion fund, we're just going to hold land, we're not interested in talking to you. Time goes on, investors start to ask for returns, and lo and behold, they were open to discussions. So we, I think what Mark said was very appropriate. Initially, our response was, because the setup here was a little different than what was done in Algonquin, it was a no-brainer. It was, let's just convert it to single family, we'll have to move some water and sewer services, but outside of that, should be pretty simple. Turned out to be much more complicated than that, but that's been the minutia that Mr. Eiden's been working on the last year or so. So that was kind of the history behind our coming to this project and this approach we've taken. Just to give you kind of an overview of what we're proposing here, and what we're proposing has changed slightly from what was presented to the board initially, and the primary change there has been that we have internally done an overhaul of all of our architecture that we build here in Chicago throughout the suburbs. We will be offering here 13 plans. Some of those plans are larger, some are smaller. Of the 13 plans, they range from 1,600 to 3,900 square feet. They range in width from 36 to 54 feet wide. I think the previous plans that we had shown the village board were starting, I think our smallest home, or our narrowest home started at 42 feet wide. So much more restrictive in what we could offer on these lots. The new plans, which are really, in a lot of ways, a revamp of old plans, brings us down to 36 feet wide is the narrowest. So a lot more flexibility, a lot more variety of homes that we can offer. We've expanded our offering not only to 13 plans, but each plan has 6 elevations. The examples I've put out in front of me here in color are, and you have them all in black and white because we're still in the process of creating the color. We have a cottage style, a craftsman style, prairie, colonial, Williamsburg, a modern farmhouse. So we've expanded our offering to 6 elevations for each plan. So essentially, we have 13 plans and over 70 elevations that we're going to offer. The lots range from 55 feet to 70 feet plus or minus wide, so that kind of leaves us with a building box of 43 to 54, or 58 rather. So that 36 to 54 foot footprint has a lot of variety that we can offer on different lots, so we're not so restrictive. And some of those narrower homes, what I think it benefits us here in Cary is now with a narrower home on that lot, we have the flexibility of offering our third car garage option. And that third car option is a 10-foot additional bay that's always recessed to the side of the home. So it's never in line with the garage. We don't double up the bulk of the garage. We just go to a 10-foot, 2-foot setback. And then we offer varieties of those that include some tandem garages. So with a 2-car garage and a tandem third bay, you can get up to a 4-car garage. So in move up family bedroom communities like Cary, we think that's a great offering to have here because everybody's got that third car, that RV, or not RV, the boat, the toy car, the motorcycle, and kids' bicycles, and so it creates an area for that we think is going to be very popular. Our approach here, besides a wide variety, is to offer predominantly 3 and 4 bedroom homes. We build with full basements, even on our structural options like our signature morning room. That's a 12-foot by 16-foot room off the back. That's off your kitchen eating area. Even that's under a full foundation. So the basements are pretty large in these homes. We expect our base pricing to start in the high 200s to the low 300s. Sale prices, we typically see 10 to 15% in options and upgrades. So we would expect to be in the mid 3s. It never ceases to amaze me the people who want to go with the full 4-car option and the morning room and the optional chef's kitchens and the ultra baths, and so I fully expect to see homes, some that will go over 400 here, and that's the nature of new construction, and that's the nature of being a builder who offers those kinds of structural options and interior options. We plan to start with a model home on what is in your plat as Lot 25, which would be, if you're looking at the new Dunkin' Donuts drive-through, that entrance on the west side, it'd be the second lot in. So what we always do is try to keep one vacant lot next to our model so that as the community starts to build out, if we choose to offer a second model or a new model, we want to refresh it with a new plan, we'll take that vacant lot next to it, and it's there for our second model. So we always try to reserve that as a plan to expand in the future. And then in addition, we'll start with a spec house, which would be something that's not pre-sold. We'll spec that house on lot 18 is what it's shown as on your final plat.
Some of the numbers got reversed.
Yeah, no, I'm going from the final plat.
Okay, 'cause
Yeah.
that lot is now 54. Parking lot.
No, not that. I haven't gotten to that yet.
Oh, okay.
This is the model. Model home will be lot 25, spec will be 18, so those will be the first things you see built. Before that, the first thing you'll see is in activity is the temporary signage, which Brian laid out in his report to you. And we have an agreement with the seller that even though it's on phase 2, the vacant parking lot that sits there today by the Westlake Stone sign as you come in right at the front entrance, that parking lot and driveway are still there. We're going to utilize that for a sales trailer location for probably a 6-month period of time. So we can hit the ground running, start to pre-sell while we're building our model, while we're building our spec, And the goal would be then by the time we move into a fully furnished, decorated model and sales office, we've got pre-solds that we've got, by the time we have our grand opening, we've got 3 or 4 more homes started. So that's the plan of approach there. And that is lot 54 on the overall plat or plat for phase 2 is where that trailer will go. Going back to the homes a little bit and the variety, because this was a question at the board, ranch homes. At the time we presented to the board, we had 1 ranch plan or 2 ranch plans, I think. We have 2 ranch plans now that we offer. What we've done is expand. We never offered this before, but we also have 2 plans that are master down. Actually, we have 3 plans now that are master down. So not only the attraction of the empty nester purely ranch home, but the two of the models that have ranch or master bedrooms on the first floor have they're geared to a different family buyer. Master bedroom down, at least 2 to 3 bedrooms, at least 1 to 2 bathrooms up. So typically the square footage of those homes is right in line with maybe some of our 2-story homes, but that master down gives you a little different layout for a buyer who might have older children or is looking forward to maybe ranch living, but still wants those secondary bedrooms for older kids, kids coming back from school, kids who are getting married and bringing grandkids home. So they still have a ranch lifestyle, but have the bedroom count and bathroom count for family, extended families. One of those master down plans, I consider, and I think we maybe even market it this way on our brochures, it's really an in-law suite. It's a master suite on the first floor, but it's designed in a home that also has a master suite on the second floor. And the second floor master suite is over 800 square feet. So the second floor master is really the true master suite, huge closets, huge living area and bathroom. But that in-law gives you an appeal to a multi-generational buyer who, the parents are in the first floor master suite and it's very private and it's a nice size for them, but the second floor has appropriate sized bedrooms and master suites for the younger generation. So with that plan, we've actually been building in Chicago here and Wisconsin for probably the last 3 or 4 years, and it's been very popular. We used to offer the second floor master suite as an option, and we've now done away with it as an option, and we just built that as the standard. And that house gets pretty large, but still will fit on a number of the lots here. With that, I just close by saying I want to acknowledge, there are neighbors here, and I think I recognize a few of them. They're welcome to have access to, I think maybe they do have access to everything that's in the application.
Yeah, we have.
But if they have questions, if they want more details or something, a little broader scope than what we're touching on here tonight, we'd be happy to share that. We look forward to a positive recommendation referring this to the village board, and looking forward to moving to implement this project and get started later this year. Our goal is to have that sales trailer open hopefully in October, start to pre-sell, and sometime around or just after Super Bowl have our model home open. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weinsma. So, ladies or gentlemen, questions for Mr. Weinsma?
I do. Looking at the requested changes to dimensions concerns me just a little bit in that, you're trying to fit the homes in there, which meet the zoning requirements. But, you've reduced your lot sizes, so you're trying to shoehorn in some houses into some of those lots. The request for 45% lot coverage from 35, is that 45% for the foundation of the house, the footprint of the house?
I think that's total coverage.
Correct.
Yeah, so that would be your drive. We're maintaining the 30-foot front, so pretty long driveways, 40-foot rear, so the setbacks all are maintained, but yeah, it would include your driveway, your porch, patio, any covered space or impervious
Well-
space.
Are patios part of your architecture?
No, they're not shown on our plans.
So the 45% then isn't set for your footprint. You're allowing some additional space to put
Right.
a deck on back or a patio out back or
Yeah,
something like
because,
that.
it could be immediately, it could be 10 years from now. I'm sure that's something the staff's going to look at. Somebody comes in for an outdoor kitchen patio, a pool, any structure, secondary structures, anything like that, that would all be factored into that. So that's a max.
Okay. Do you have any idea what your average footprint is? 30%, 35%, 25%?
The only time we get, even with our ranch homes, which just inherently have a bigger footprint, the only time we typically get over maybe 30% is in a ranch condition where we have a buyer that chooses the third car tandem. So even though it's within the footprint from the streetscape, you see a 3-car garage, that garage area just went to just over 800 square feet. So when you start getting into just spaces like that we offer, otherwise the 2-story homes, the footprints are typically smaller than our ranches. But again, from a streetscape, we've got 3 or 4 plans that we offer that are 2-car garage from the street that have a tandem third bay in the footprint of the house. And again, when you start adding a third bay and tandem that, you're getting into a pretty big garage space that all qualifies towards that coverage, but it doesn't really change the scale of the home or the streetscape of the home. But I think we're leaving some room there for the future for people who want to expand their outdoor living space or anything like that.
So what I heard you say then is on ranch homes, they're generally below 30%. With certain additions and such, they can go over 30%, but they're not approaching 40, 45%. There's plenty of room for the homeowner. What I'm concerned about is that you put a 40% footprint out there, and all of a sudden we're getting a homeowner coming in wanting a variance to 60%.
Yeah.
So.
Well, one of the things that we're developing right now, and we will have fully developed before we start any sales, is what we call a lot fit matrix. And that, it's a pretty complicated spreadsheet, but it tells our salespeople and our production people exactly which models will fit on which lot and which options. So, and part of the restriction that we create internally then is our sales force knows up front what homes don't fit on what lots and what options don't fit on what lots. And then what we'll do in this case, because there is that restriction, and there's a really wide variety of sizes of lots here. What we want to restrict up front is, and typically the market kind of follows this path anyway, but what we don't want is somebody to buy the biggest house on the smallest lot.
Right.
And then you're bumping up against that max. We don't want that. Typically, the buyer who wants the biggest house doesn't want the smallest lot, so that kind of works together. But yeah, we will look at all those factors as we lay out that lot fit matrix and kind of try to restrict ourselves. Even if a house will fit on a lot, if we know that lot's already going to be a challenge from a coverage standpoint, we'll just restrict that plan. And we've got enough plans to choose from that we're not tying our hands by doing that.
So the 13 styles that you mentioned here are just a handful from your library?
No, those are the new library for
this-
Illinois,
for
for
this-
Chicago.
For Chicago?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we
So
will,
there are, out of those 13, there may be some then, when you're done with your study, that don't fit into this development at all.
they'll all fit on some lot. If we choose not to offer one, it'll be for all the reasons that you're concerned with and we're concerned with, is that it's too much. It's the width and what will happen is, even if we come out of the box with all 13 plans and all 76 elevations offered, as homes are sold, plans will drop off of our offering. I mean, once we've sold on the lots that those houses are appropriate on, we won't offer that home anymore because it won't fit on any of the other lots, or it won't, or it's too big for those lots, or the options that we know are popular are too big for those lots. So I think even if we start with 13, by the time we start to sell through these lots, there'll be 9 or 10 homes offered because the other 3 just aren't available anymore. And, it's not a bad marketing strategy. I mean, it does create some urgency in the market that if this is the home you really want, these are the lots it fits on. Once it's gone, it's gone. And we're not going to hold out this lot. If somebody comes along and they want to buy a home that would otherwise fit on 10 other lots, but they want that lot, we'll sell that lot. And then that's just one lot that fits on. And, if you come back in 3-4 months, it may not be available. So that's kind of our approach.
Okay?
Just to add on to that,
So essentially what you're telling me is then that other than being concerned about your requested dimensional reductions, I don't need to worry about anything else because you're going to manage that.
I would
To
hope
trust
that's
you
the
to
case.
manage that. Okay, go ahead, Neil.
in some developments, are there any restrictions on which ones, not just lot size, but the models? You're not going to have 4 of the same in a row, or,
Yeah, we have,
Variation.
that's a good question. We have our own anti-monotony standard that, when you've got this many elevations to choose from, it typically doesn't become a problem. But our own anti-monotony restricts the same plan to be built on either side or across the street.
Okay.
And if it's a staggered lot where the lot lines are not meeting up directly, it's both of those lots across the street. So you get kind of, once that house gets built, now those other 4 lots are restricted from being that same plan and elevation.
That was going to be my question also. You got 26 places in phase 1, and all of a sudden, one of your models becomes the most popular thing in the world, and 20 people want to put that same model house in. That's not going to happen, right?
No,
Okay,
no.
I trust you.
Phase 2 gets opened a lot quicker.
It's recorded.
Right.
Gentlemen, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weinsma. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know you've been very patient sitting out there. We're just going to ask our Director of Community Development once more just to kind of step us through a couple of more elements, and then we're going to open it up to yourself. So thank you for your patience.
Mark, if you could switch back to my PowerPoint, sorry. And the petitioner covered a lot of what I had left in my presentation, so I won't, it looks like it was closed. Let me jump around real quick. You won't be able to find it.
I solved that problem. And made it yours.
Apologize for that delay. I won't go through the entire plan again, but as far as the proposal, obviously it's the proposed subdivision for single-family lots, and the southern half of the site is being reviewed. These are elevations that were presented previously by the petitioner, but obviously they've remodeled their plans since this time period. Briefly, wanted to focus on the comprehensive plan. As anytime we review a development, we refer to the comprehensive plan for guidance as far as potential approval of that development. And specifically within, as Mr. Iden mentioned, there's guidance for this specific property within the plan, but specifically within the Western Gateway sub-area plan, there are a few references that speak specifically to the Westlake subdivision. Specifically, as we all know, the development has struggled to reach its build-out, having stalled for the last decade practically. The village should focus on supporting this development going forward. And also on page 41, it specifically references the site, saying that allowing for a different type of development to take place at the site may revive development activity on the property. Specifically, that Westlake is an attractive location for a small lot, single-family development, which is what the petitioner is proposing this evening. Again, approvals that are being requested, they're seeking approval for 2 phases for the planned development. Phase 1 is highlighted in red on this slide, and then phase 2 in blue. They're also asking for the preliminary plat approval and final plat approval accordingly for those 2 phases, along with landscaping improvements and development signs advertising the proposed development. I won't go through all the standards as Mr. Iden referenced there in the petition, but there are standards within the ordinance for planned developments, which are highlighted in the slide, which the petitioner has provided information as how their development complies with those standards. As part of the PUD, they're asking for various departures from the bulk standards for the site, and these would be specific to any development that would occur in the future in both phase 1 and phase 2. Specifically, the departures from the R2 district requirements with the PUD ordinance would require developments to comply with our minimum lot area, decreasing that down to 7,600 square feet. Again, the average lot size is 9,600 square feet. Decreasing the lot width down to 55 feet for a minimum width. Again, most of the lot, or the narrowest lot in the subdivision is 57 feet as proposed. That will comply with the lot depth of 125 feet, a front setback of 30 feet, which is consistent with the existing setbacks for the townhomes that are in the neighborhood presently. They're asking a reduction for the exterior side setback for any corner lots, where that setback would be decreased from 30 feet to 20 feet to allow for various models to be constructed in those properties. And then the side yard setbacks between individual units, they require a 6-foot setback in either property line, so you'd have at least 12 feet separation between single-family homes. The setback would remain. Again, density complies with the standard. They are requesting an increase the lot coverage to 45%, which is consistent with the existing lot coverage for the R3 district. The existing townhomes are allowed to go up to 45%, and the building height would comply with 30 feet measured to the midpoint of the roof. This slide, just for reference, kind of highlights the lot widths and what lots would be in certain ranges. So you can see there are 23 lots that would be between 55 feet and 60 feet in width. Another 20 lots would be between 60 and 65 feet in width, and 16 lots would be greater than 65 feet in width. So they're kind of congregated in certain areas, so there's consistency throughout the subdivision as far as how large or how wide lots would be in the subdivision. A slightly more colorful slide. This slide details the lot size, which kind of speaks towards Commissioner Jasper's questions as far as the mean. As you can see on this slide, there are 9 lots that are proposed that would be below 8,000 square feet. That would be close to the minimum lot frontage. And those are primarily, there's 4 lots along Westbury Drive in the southwest corner of the site. And there's another 5 lots that are in phase 2 along Amber Drive that are that size. And then there's 6 additional lots that are 8,000 to 8,500 square feet in width that are spread throughout the subdivision, are primarily due to the bulb of the cul-de-sac on Wellington Lane. There's lot and this slide indicates lot 44, just due to the depth of that area, it constrains the size of the lot, and then also there's 2 lots to the north of Wellington Lane, which are constricted due to the bike path location that exists presently, and then 3 lots in phase 2, 2 that are together and along Wellington Lane and 1 on Amber Drive in the corner. The majority of the lots actually would be over 8,500 square feet in size within the subdivision. I believe the calculation is about 75% of the lots would be above that size requirement, with 33% of them of greater than 9,500 square feet in size. So although they're asking for a reduction for the minimum lot size in this regards, majority of the lots in the subdivision will be over 8,500 square feet in size. The lot size reduction is primarily due to the existing roadway network that's in place. They're not modifying the roadway, so they're existingly constrained from that standpoint as far as what type of lots can be provided. Again, seeking request for preliminary plat approval for both phase 1 and phase 2, final plat approval for phase 1, and then 2 years to submit for final plat approval for phase 2. In this, for phase 2, there would be, if phase 2 doesn't proceed, for single-family homes, there's provision that's in your, was on the dais for revised language for one of the conditions, and that would speak towards that condition, so that if they don't proceed with the application for the final plat, that they would be able to develop the townhouse plan as originally approved. So phase 2 was approved for 33 single-family detached homes, as proposed this evening, but was approved for 66 townhomes in the original development, should that phase of this project not go forward. Again, landscaping and temporary signs were requested as part of the petition, summarized in this slide, but that would also be reviewed by the village board. The petitioner did provide responses to our conditional use standards, which again are summarized in this slide. I won't go through, but they provide justification for how the proposed development complies with those standards. Finally, based off the information that you have in your packet and that staff has reviewed, that the information the petitioners provided, staff is recommending, should the ZPA concur with the recommendation, recommend approval of the 3 motions that are listed here. Approval of conditional use for the preliminary and final plan development master plan for the proposed reserve of Westlake subdivision, subject to conditions in the revised packet that was on your dais this evening. Approval of a preliminary plat of subdivision for both phase 1 and phase 2, and approval of a final plat of subdivision for phase 1.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simmons. So gentlemen, before we turn it over to the public, any other questions for Mr. Simmons at this time? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience. This is the time where we open it up to public comment. So if anyone would like to speak, when you approach the microphone, if you just simply state your name and address for the record, that will be greatly appreciated.
Hello, my name is Mary Pennington, and I live at 1113 Amber Drive. And I believe where I live at is the one that is excluded in this document, the townhouse. If you could put the map back up, because I just want to have a clear understanding that that's my property, right there,
I get that.
right there, the white space. Can I just point that out just so I'm sure? Right here.
Yes.
That's, okay. Just want to make sure I know where I'm located on this. I'm sorry I missed your February meeting when you had it with the Homeowners Association. So I just really want to know how this impacts me, because it appears I'm going to be surrounded and swallowed up if your plan works out. Maybe you'll have to build me a house, I don't know. But I just want you to explain how that impacts me with the Homeowners Association.
Sure. You remain.
Can we come up to the microphone? So I think just so everyone's aware, we're deviating a little bit from this. It's designed to be public comment and not a back and forth, but that's okay,
I'm
Mary.
sorry.
That's
I
okay. No, I
apologize.
think this is going to be helpful in the end. This is going to be helpful in the end, so we'll deviate a little bit. We'll be
Okay.
flexible.
It's easily
Yeah.
answered. what remains of the Townhome Association north of Wellington is governed by your current townhome declaration, which specifies the do's and don'ts and all those things. The area that you live in remains governed by the existing Townhome Association. So all the rules that apply to townhomes north of Wellington will continue to apply to you. The reason we have to change those rules for single family is because there are characteristics of townhomes that are not the same as single family, because they're a different type, although they're still each residential. So what we do is we replace them with provisions that are more appropriate to single family, but they're all fairly similar. And originally in the current state, you see all these bike paths and things of that nature. Well, they're governed by your declaration, but when we record ours, we pick up, it's not like we erased it, we pick up those same obligations to maintain those things. So we're only making adjustments that make our association more compatible with single-family homes. But when you do these declarations, we will have our own association, our own people will have to pay assessments, and those assessments will be used by our association to fund its activities, such as contribute to the detention pond, to maintain the bike paths and the outlots that they are in, both the single-family subdivision and the townhome subdivision will have the same free access to and use of those bike paths. And of course, everybody uses all the roads just as they have in the past. So that adjustment needs to be made, but it is not a radical adjustment. It's more for appropriateness to the use. The homes that would surround your townhome building, I believe they would all be smaller because the building has several units in it. And so you won't be dwarfed by bulk, by big buildings. Previously, or actually on the current plan, there would be large buildings, just like there are to the north, adjoining one another. You can see two of them in the upper right corner. Well, the adjoining building to the south of those two will be a much smaller single-family residence because there's only one family in there instead of, I believe, four. And so the concept, in my opinion, you won't be overwhelmed by buildings. In fact, you'll kind of be underwhelmed from the current plan. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I apologize.
No, not at all.
I deviated from your form.
No, you know something, it's actually helpful, I think, in the end, that we do it this way, but it is designed just for public comment and not for question and answer. But if this assuages the concern, Mary, and I hope it did, then success to all of us.
Yeah, I would just point out a couple other just kind of practical things is the parking lot that's on that lot now next to you. Once we move into our model sales office, that parking lot will be removed and then seeded over to grass until we build phase 2. And then also the stone Westlake sign that's to the right of your building now overlaps onto what will be, I think, lot 54. That we're going to pay them to also move that sign over so it's in townhome outlot and not on the single family lot at all.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, other questions from the public? You're welcome, sir. Yeah, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Philip Keith. I'm at 1290 Prairie View Parkway. And I've got several questions, but I'm getting hungry, so I'm at the top two. We hit on a couple of them already. The Westlake sign is going to be relocated. The new subdivision will have its own name then. It will not be a cohesive Westlake subdivision.
No, it'll still be Westlake.
So the entire, including the single families, will still be Westlake.
Yeah, we will likely refer to it from a marketing standpoint as like the preserve of Westlake or something to that effect.
All right. As far as public comment, Mr. Jasper hit on that too. When we met in February, I thought some of the lot sizes that were proposed were kind of small. 9 lots at 8,000 square feet. I guess look to your expertise for that. My biggest concern is traffic, if a traffic analysis has been done, because as you know, there's 2 exits out of the subdivision. One of them only works if you're going to Crystal Lake. So coming out of the subdivision out there by AutoZone during peak time, especially if there's a lot of traffic in the retail areas, turning left onto Three Oaks is already difficult. And with the proposed amount of additional traffic, not to mention the construction traffic for a couple of years, big concern. I know we probably couldn't put a light there, nor would we want to, but it's already a dangerous intersection, and I think that really needs to be looked at. We touched on why the plans changed. I believe the answer was that just new architectural styles and models, new offerings. So that's what's changed. Is that what's delayed your start since we met in February? I thought we were going to break ground in May.
No, it's been a number of things.
Okay.
It's gotten very kind of.
Well, I'm not.
Presentation is just scratching.
Okay. I'm not trying to compliment anything. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keith. Anyone else would like to address? Good evening.
Hi, my name is Ken Miller. I live at 1177 Westlake. Question that I have mainly for the Ryan Group is what about fence restrictions on the newly developed property?
We'll look them up in declaration.
I think it's
in there.
Yeah, it's in the packet. Yeah, right.
I think this is
Like
the
to answer part of your
application.
question, I think. We do know there is a provision for fences in the declaration. Okay.
Yes.
Is it limited to 1 style, 2 styles?
Semi-open.
Yeah.
The provision for fences is in the declaration that we would use to replace the townhome declaration, and it is in section 10.7 design guidelines. And it states basically that the fences must tie into the dwelling no more than 36 feet in front of the rear facade. Obviously can't be extended over driveways and things of that nature. If they go on a slope, they would either stair step or follow the grade, but they would have vertical posts constructed of unpainted, stained cedar, black powder coated aluminum or white PVC only. No chain link, no masonry fencing. All fencing on a single lot have to be of the same design and materials. No fence shall be higher than 4 feet and must be semi-open. That's, am I still on? Okay. This includes without limitation fences on yards adjoining a street, park, and the community area. And then there's a provision with regard to fences that are in overland drainage routes that have to allow for the passage of water. So those are the provisions in the declaration. Does that answer your question?
Were there any other questions, Mr. Miller?
No.
No? Okay. You're welcome. Anyone else like to speak?
Will we get a copy of this presentation? Is that available?
I believe it could be available. I know for certain that when you watch the YouTube video, you may see pieces of this, but I think you're looking for hard copy, correct?
Well, yeah, which presentation? Yeah, it's all in the packet.
But, yeah, my PowerPoint, I can provide a copy if you request a copy, it's fine.
Okay. So unless there's any other questions, ladies and gentlemen, we'll close the public portion. I hope you found that useful. Normally, we just say public comment, no Q&A, but I think we got to a good place. So I hope that was helpful. So with that, I'm going to bring it back in now and see if any of the ZPA members have additional questions about the application at this time.
We've got two things. First off, the fencing that he described is all within village standards?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, it's more restrictive than village standards.
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was going to say it's more.
Did village staff spend any time going over the lot size concerns and which architectural styles of homes would fit on what lots? And maybe not particular lots, but just the conversation that we had here this evening.
Yeah, we did not delve deep into the details of it. Obviously, from a standpoint, you're creating lots that are of certain size and width that will restrict with the setback requirements that are established of what type of housing could go on those properties. We did do an analysis to determine if there's other subdivisions in the village currently that are comparable to what's being proposed here from a lot size and width standpoint. There are a few that are somewhat older subdivisions, but do have comparable configurations and lot sizes to what's being proposed here.
Such as?
Can go in, I have this, anticipating this question.
You asked that?
Candlewood Trails Unit 1, which if you're familiar with this subdivision, it's just south of Three Oaks Road and the library and Three Oaks Elementary School. It has, and I have more information, but lot sizes here, widths are, if you can read this slide, 60 feet, in some cases up to 62 feet in width. And you do have, two-story homes, two-car garages that are in that area. Just to the east of that is Candlewood Trails Unit 2. Again, they have shallower lots, so they're not as deep as what code currently requires. Minimum requirement is 125 feet. This subdivision has some lots that are 110 feet deep, but they have 70-foot wide lots in that area, so they're somewhat larger in area. But again, you can see some of the housing types that are in that subdivision, and that's just, again, south of the Three Oaks Elementary School along Three Oaks Road. The Hanson Oakview Estates is bordered by First Street on its eastern side, includes Lloyd Street, Margaret Terrace, James Way. Those lots in that subdivision are about 66 feet in width, up to 75 feet, but those are deeper than some other subdivisions, so they're 132-foot deep lots. They're larger in size. And then also closer to Village Hall here, the upper right-hand corner of this slide is Maplewood School property. This is the Frank's West Edition where you have 66-foot wide lots, but they're deeper than what Hanson Oaks has is 150-foot deep lots. And just some statistics, I just ran this earlier today to give you a comparison of the reserve of Westlake versus those subdivisions. As you can see, the average lot size as proposed for reserve is larger than 3 of those subdivisions. The lot size minimum is also larger than 2 of those, and again, only 8 homes which are or properties within this proposed subdivision are less than 8,000 square feet. So those would exceed those for the Candlewood Trail and 1 and 2, and then the lot widths, how they compare with those other subdivisions are shown here as well as the lot depths. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. So other than my questions here tonight, you spent some time conveying the same concerns or thoughts as to managing architectural elevation styles with the lots.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I'd only like to address one of the, and sorry, sorry, your name went right by me.
Mr. Gill.
Phil, and Jim, you're going to have to help me on this one, but as I recall, because I was on the board when we did the original Westlake, a traffic study was kind of done, and we realized, I think even at that time, it was, and you know, I live next door, I'm in Bright Oaks, so I feel your pain, because trying to get out of Bright Oaks half the time isn't a possibility. But in looking at this, and knowing the nature of a townhome as opposed to a single family, you're actually getting less traffic than if they built it out as all townhomes.
Correct. I was expecting that response. However, having lived there for...
Well, but you've lived there with only 10 units, so it's been kind of comfortable.
There's a lot more traffic on Three Oaks than there was 8 years ago.
Yes, no, I agree, I agree.
That's my point. Maybe it's time for a new study. I don't know that there's much we can do about it, but it, just like your subdivision, it's dangerous. People try to turn left on Three Oaks at 7 o'clock when school is in session.
No, there's plenty of times I go right out of Bright Oaks and go around, just because you're not going to get out going left. And I'm right there with you, because I live next door neighbors, basically, so I'm right there with you. I do understand. But we are adding, I mean, obviously, we're adding less traffic to your neighborhood. It's the traffic out on Three Oaks that needs to be addressed.
So, Mr. O'Loughlin, I could see our friend, Mr. Simmons, taking some notes on this. So I think that's going to be something that Mr. Simmons is capturing to look at.
Yeah, just from a traffic engineer standpoint, obviously, we're talking half the number of units, maybe theoretically the same number of cars, but your traffic patterns for single family are a lot different than your condo units, because even if you got 3 cars in the garage, there's only one going out at the peak hour in the morning. So you're probably going to have less traffic during the peak hours than you would have had the whatever 118 units gone in, as opposed to what we anticipate the 59 units would be.
But I believe the bigger concern is Three Oaks itself, which, being right next door in Bright Oaks, it's a problem. But that's not, not your subdivision problem or mine, it's a Three Oaks issue.
The other problem is the spacing from US 14 to
both of them.
That drive is right on the edge for possible signalization or anything else. They have to get some special design and that in there to meet the quarter-mile minimum requirements. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Graziano. Gentlemen, any other questions? No. All right, if there are no other questions, I'm going to call the motion. And Chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of 1, a conditional use for a preliminary and final plan development master plan for the reserve of Westlake subdivision, subject to the conditions as listed in the staff report. And gentlemen, I just want to be clear for the record that I'm looking at this piece of paper where D was changed, D David, and highlighted in yellow.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And then 2, a preliminary plat of subdivision for Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the reserve of Westlake Plan Development. And 3, a final plat of subdivision for Phase 1 of the reserve of Westlake Plan Development.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, comments, questions on the motion?
I'll just make a comment. I'm not going to do my normal routine here. As I understand it now, and took me a while to grasp all this, there was a little bit to go through.
Yeah.
I understand that the way the zoning sets up right now, we have to do the conditional use thing first, basically, because that's under a overhanging thing for thing. Once that's approved, then we can do the replanting of the subdivision to match what we just approved. So based on our conversation the other day, when we were saying,
So just to be clear, everyone, what Mr. Graziano is referring to is that when I just called the motion, I included each and every element that the petitioner is asking for, and what Mr. Graziano is asking for here, and that I did discuss with council, and council, you're welcome to join in here. we had said that at the beginning of our meeting, Mr. Graziano, we were going to call it in totality, and I did check with council, but I keep an open mind with these things, as always. And council, if you want to comment further, you're welcome, and we can separate them. Whatever's easy for everyone, we'll step through it.
Right, we can separate it. You do need the conditional use to approve the plans. We typically do it all in one because they all play off together. It's a little different if you had multiple variations that they could stand alone. The plans don't stand alone from the conditional use, so we typically take it together. But if you want to vote on them separately, we certainly can.
That's fine. I just didn't want to have to change my hat in the middle from zoning to
Planning.
so.
All right. Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Graziano?
No problem.
Okay, and gentlemen, is that acceptable to all of you?
Yes.
All right. So with that said, I'm going to ask Mr. Simmons to now call the vote.
Commissioner Jasper,
Yes.
Commissioner Kretschmer,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Laughlin,
Yes.
Commissioner Graziano,
Yes.
Commissioner Pippin,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Chairman Corey.
Yes. So gentlemen, you have a favorable review, and as I mentioned at the first part of our meeting, my recommendation, I think you're familiar with our process, to stay in very close contact with Mr. Simmons. We'll wish you every success with the next step, which is to go before the village board and receive final approval for what you're requesting. So good luck, and thank you to everyone involved here
I
tonight.
just have one more comment, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
I'm going to need help selecting between the Savannah and the Sheridan.
First floor master.
You think? Well, it's the porch that gets, my wife wants a front porch. So.
Just got the master on the first floor.
All right, I just have one more piece of business. Are there any other questions from ZPA members? All right, I'll entertain a motion to conclude our meeting.
So moved. Smooth?
Meeting concluded. Thank you very much.